applause, Democratic presidential candidate Mayor Pete Buttigieg of South Bend, Indiana. All right, so I'll just say it.
You want to say it?
Congratulations. You did I really think in many ways you prevailed last night, temperamentally and across the board. I think you're an incredible candidate.
I mean, you could cough, and Mika would say that.
No.
I'm joking.
It's not true.
No. You know, so let's talk, though, first of all, about all the shouting that was going on. I noticed you were one candidate that was not shouting. One candidate was not shouting to get in. One candidate was not shouting your answers. I thought, it was said of FDR that he had a third-rate intellect but a first-rate temperament. I think you're first-rate intellect and first-rate temperament. But do you think it's important to give Americans an alternative to Donald Trump's temperament?
Well, I think what we have right now is a sense that Washington is filled with shouting, that, everybody on Capitol Hill is shouting at each other. The president's shouting at all of us. And to be fair, when there's 20 candidates, 10 across each night who are trying to get their message out, frankly, this is what candidates are coached to do, right? Never mind the moderators, never mind the time limit, never mind basic politeness, just get in there. And at the same time, I think people are looking for a conversation where we actually stop and think, precisely because we have a president who doesn't do that. So there's an opportunity sometimes to show versus tell how you're going to run things differently. And of course, the balance every candidate's got to think about is how do you get a word in edgewise without joining in that scrum?
One of the lightning round questions, Mr. Mayor, was what would be the first thing you do as president? And you didn't have a lot of time to flesh it out, but you said we've got to fix our democracy. Yep. Everything flows from there. What did you mean specifically? Because that's different from fixing the economy. Right. That's a very broad point. What did you mean by that? Well,
it's because every issue depends on this. All the other things we were talking about, well, it's everything, right? And we saw a reminder yesterday of what's at stake with the Supreme Court paving the way for partisan gerrymandering. What they said was you can gerrymander based on party, just not based on race. But of course, partisan gerrymandering is racial gerrymandering. They just give it a different name. That's just one example of the many ways in which our democracy is being twisted. Unfair districts, unfair influence of money, an unfair setup when it comes to an electoral college overruling the American people, the way that people are prevented from voting, the way that it's hard to register to vote, much of which helps keep people who are disadvantaged more disadvantaged. And the reason I think we've got to deal with this on day one is every other issue that we care about is going to be hard to fix until our democracy is decent. Now, some of these things I'm talking about, I mean, the Electoral College, that's going to take years, but you got to start on day one. Some things you could move on quite quickly. They were in the House bill, the anti-corruption, pro-democracy H.R. 1, which the House passed, only to have it die in the Senate. We've got to act on these things. Otherwise, we're going to continue to see situations from immigration to universal background checks on guns where Americans want to see something happen and Washington cannot deliver.
So on those two big points, abolish the Electoral College, you're still for that, and expand the Supreme Court, add another seat?
Well, it's not just about throwing seats on it. It's about a reform to the Supreme Court that would make it less political. The court is day by day coming to be viewed as a nakedly political institution, and our country can't afford for it to be so. It's supposed to stand apart. So I've floated a number of reforms. The one that would be the most dramatic would be to have 15 seats, but 5 of the justices could only be appointed by unanimous agreement of the other 10. There are legal scholars advancing this as a reform. We've done about a half dozen changes to the size or makeup of the court. And I think we've got to entertain deep and perhaps unprecedented structural solutions. That may not be the right answer. There may be others. But on day one, we got to set up a commission of some of the most respected legal scholars and get this done.
Rev, I want to ask you really quickly before you ask Mayor Pete a question. What was your take of the shouting and the screaming last night on stage?
The tone of it all.
I thought that it was not good for the entire Democratic Party because I think that in many ways it said to the public who are not insiders in either party that the same kind of bedlam and confusion we see daily out of Trump is being duplicated by the Democrats. We have to be, if we're going to be an alternative, you have to behave like an alternative. And that kind of, it became bizarre. And I don't think you want to replace Democratic havoc for Republican havoc. We have had all of the noise from the master of noise, Mr. Trump. You don't want to show you can be just as noisy.
Right.
But you want to stand out. So
you want to
it's a fine
stand out. You want to have something to say.
Yeah.
No.
But the Mayor Pete, with the police killing in South Bend, and you called me and you called others after, and I think that was good. I think that what I was missing from what you said last night, and I thought you made a very good statement, is what is the plan and what was the plan to deal with the lack of diversity in the South Bend police? The question was, how do you have 6 blacks on a police force that 26% of the city is black? And you said you failed, which is admirable, but failed at what? Was there a plan? And will you make this police chief come with a plan or fire him like you helped get rid of the last police chief who was black? Because it's time for somebody to be held accountable. Due process has to be given to policemen. Somebody has to be held accountable for the killing of Logan. But you don't need due process to say, I want a plan on my desk on how we're going to deal with this lack of diversity, or you're out of here like you did the black police.
What do you say?
I think you're right. It's a top priority. I can walk you through all the things we've tried to do, but while I'm proud of the diversity in my office and our top team on the commission that does the hiring and firing of police officers, when it comes to the rank and file, this has been a huge struggle. We've had work in schools to try to cultivate diverse people to a career in law enforcement from early in life. We've reached out. We've even hired psychologists or engaged with behavioral researchers to help us figure out which kind of recruiting messages diverse applicants will respond to more. If you're watching, you can actually go onto the Police Transparency Hub in South Bend and see some of the data that we're publishing about where applicants of different backgrounds fall off in the process. This is a South Bend problem, but this is a national problem. Attracting people in general and attracting people of color to the career of policing is a huge challenge. I'm going to own up to the fact that we haven't got there, and we're going to look at what the cities that have been the most effective at this have done, because clearly there's something else that we could be doing that we haven't hit on yet.
So Eric Swalwell a few times last night talked about passing the torch to a new generation. You also talked about the need for a new generation of leadership, echoing John Kennedy's call. After watching Joe Biden on stage last night, do you think that maybe his time is up, that his time has passed him by?
Obviously, I'm a champion of generational change, but I also believe that you have to have a vision with that. I still believe that a person of any age could be a great candidate. The question is, if you're offering that generational outlook, is it backed by a vision that explains what our generation is supposed to deliver? I think the homework for my generation is clear. Deal with climate change before it deals with us, achieve tremendous strides in racial equality before systemic racism tears apart the American project in my lifetime, deliver an economy where the rising tide actually does lift all boats versus that just being a saying. We got to get cracking on that right away. Now, you don't have to have a young candidate for young voters or an older candidate for older voters. I do think that part of what you saw last night was the range of diversity in our party, and that includes, obviously, a lot of generational diversity too.
All right.
I mean, I totally take your point on how, the candidate's age doesn't necessarily have to line up with the block of voters. But on this Biden question, and I think you saw some of this from Kamala Harris on the stage, the suggestion is that he has simply been in politics too long. He's been around Washington too long, and that the country has changed, the party has changed without him seeing that. Do you think that's the case?
Yeah, especially a lot of these issues. I think what we're learning is some of these issues, we just got to think about them and talk about them differently in our time. And I do think that is a struggle. If you've been in a certain pattern, you're used to certain things because it's how it's worked in Washington for a very long time. I also think the challenge we have in a moment like this is there's this temptation to play it safe in the Democratic Party. That's almost always been self-defeating. But that temptation is there because we all know how important it is that we defeat Donald Trump. And out of that is arising this message that what we're going to offer as a party is we're going to go back to normal. We're going to return to what we were doing before. And that's a very dangerous message for us to adopt because normal didn't work, not in the industrial Midwest where I live. It's because of the failure of our economic and political normal that so many people were willing to vote for somebody they didn't even like, which is this current president. If we look like we're trying to promise that we'll go back to the 2000s or 1990s, even if that's just kind of the implied in our messaging, then I think we're going to lose a lot of people because we can't keep that promise any more than Trump can keep the promise of turning America back to the 1950s.
All right, so not to get generational on you, but my 23-year-old daughter says, tell Mayor Pete he did a great job last night. Did you want to say something,
Yeah, I
Reverend?
just want to say I think that we cannot oversimplify this generational thing because I think Joe Biden, who's the second oldest guy in the race, has had a race problem, and you have a race problem. You're the youngest guy. We need to have people that will stand up every generation. I don't want a young guy doing me wrong any more than I want an old guy doing me wrong. I want to be done right.
Absolutely.
So the Rev wants to be done right. How is the Rev done right here in this case?
Well, I mean, we've talked about this specific issue that
So can I just ask you, like, for instance, are you saying that you have a problem with the applicant pool? Because it sounds like your answer was that you have had outreach to a diverse community, but at some point in the application process, some of the more diverse candidates fall off and are not qualified, at least in the applicant pool that you're getting. Has that been a problem?
That's part of it, yeah. And we've actually mapped out at each step where we're most likely to lose a diverse applicant. And the question now is, are some of those steps screening in a way that has racial disparity but doesn't actually predict whether somebody's going to be a good officer? We're always going to have high standards.
Right.
But if there's something in that process that has a disparate impact, then that's hurting us in our goal of having a more diverse department. But of course, diversity in the police department is just part of this bigger challenge of wrestling with systemic racism and the way that that's impacted police work. And part of my message to police departments, I spoke to recruits recently who were just graduating, is that even the best human being ever to wear the uniform is still burdened with what the uniform carries with it. Every time we see a cell phone video of some shocking abusive treatment of usually a black man at the hands of police, every time we look deep into history, but also into this moment, that is something that makes it harder for any police department to do their job. You know, dealing with regular gun violence, not police violence, but just regular violence between civilians. One of the most important things in order to deal with that is police legitimacy, because you need witness and victim cooperation in order to make sure people turn to the police rather than taking matters into their own hands in these cycles of retaliation. You can't have that if people don't trust the police. That's why it's so urgent and a matter of life and death that we tear down that wall of mistrust.
All right.
We'd love to have you on to talk more about, especially with Reverend Al. These are complicated issues. It's an important conversation. Mayor Pete Buttigieg, thank you very much.
Congratulations.
All right, so go ahead on Morning Joe. 3 more Democratic presidential candidates, Senators Kamala Harris and Michael Bennet, will both join the conversation here in Miami. But first, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand joins the conversation next. You're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.